on this call have already heard the Doug intro slides. I will go fairly quickly with these. But for those of you watching the recording, my name is Madison Zulowitz, and I am the event coordinator here at Doug. So I help run our local and regional meetup program. Doug is a free community for users, implementers, and resellers of Microsoft business applications. Our main goal is to support Microsoft Dynamics 365, GP, and Power Platform community, and we want to help you excel and grow in your personal and professional careers. Our rules of engagement is we essentially ask that these meetups are held to be solely educational. So please no sales pitches. If you are in the audience, please ask questions. I know Khaled would appreciate it. And for everybody to get involved, that's how you get the most out of these meetups. And Dynamics User Group, we have multiple different programs. We have open online discussion forums where you can go and ask any questions to our community and they will help answer. We have webinars, local meetups like this one, and all of our virtual local meetups, they get recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. So lots of great free content on our YouTube channel where you can see what the entire world is talking about in all of our local meetups. We also have our DynamicsCon conference coming up, which I'll get to in a second. And I hate when it does that, sorry. We have our DynamicsCon regionals in North America coming up. So we are going to Canada, June 16th and 17th. I'm sure Kelly and Claude will be there. So super excited for that. We'll be in Toronto. We're going to Colorado in August, Ohio in August, Texas in September, and back to Tampa, Florida in January. And we're also going international. So we will be going to West Africa in July and East Africa at the end of July. We're also going to Copenhagen, Denmark on September 4th. So very excited to be traveling worldwide. We have our 2025 DynamicsCon, which is our largest conference of the year, going on May 13th through the 16th. This is a multi-day conference, full days of education, networking, really great opportunity to get involved in the community. And we have a 15% off code for all of our meetup members. So if you are a member of one of these meetups and are looking to get involved, I would highly suggest attending, and you can use that 15% off code there, and I'll send that in the chat. And if anybody has any questions about Doug, feel free to reach out to me, either send me a Teams chat or an email, and I'd be happy to help. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Madison. Kelly, we're gonna pass it over to you to talk about building a better product portfolio, which I'm very excited to learn about.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. Let's minimize my screen. So awesome. Yeah, we're gonna focus on building a better product portfolio today, and more importantly, how you can go from market discovery to scalable growth. So for today's agenda, we're going to start out with some theory and frameworks, go all the way to a few more practical tips. So I'll start us off with some definitions on innovation, product portfolio development, and some pieces around design thinking. We'll go into sustainable foundations and how to establish feedback loops, segment your audience, and empower your revenue and marketing functions. And then lastly, we're going to go into some anecdotes, some guides, some additional resources that you can use that I think will be really helpful. So let's get started with some definitions. And I think one of the main things that we have to think about when we're building a product is how desirable is it? Companies really only exist if there is someone willing to pay for the services or the products or offerings that they have. And so we do really need to start with the human element and whether there is a market that desires the product that we have or not. But just because someone wants to buy it doesn't mean they're going to buy it for the right price. It has to make sense from a business perspective, and it has to be business viable, meaning you can deliver the service at the right rate that the consumer's willingness to pay hits. And lastly, it also has to be feasible. Of course, we're not going to be able to build, I don't know, lightsabers or some like future tech that we have no idea how to build just because someone is willing to pay for it, and what they would pay for it is a lot of money. And so at the intersection of all of these really is what we have as innovation. We often think of innovation as something that is like just re-architecting the world or something like that. In the business sense, it's really the intersection of these three. And so we'll take a look at some scenarios. Maybe you're a company, you're creating this new product, you're really excited about it. You start delivering it to some market. Well, if they're interested in it, that's great. If they're not interested, it's going to happen to you. You're not going to be able to make the money that you expected to make. If we have desirability, but we take a look and think about, is it viable? Is the money going to make it break even for us or hit our profit goals? And if the answer is no, then that's another problem, another obstacle that we have to avoid. Let's say that it is desirable, it is viable, but then we look at the feasibility and our product team says, well, you guys sold this, but there's nothing to be sold. We're not able to build it. That's, again, going to be another bottleneck. And that's why we have to think about all three in conjunction and at the intersection of them. A good way to do this is to employ design thinking, because you can't go back retroactively and say, okay, now that we've built the product, we're going to test it for feasibility, or now that we've built the product, we're going to test it for viability and desirability. You need to be able to kind of like push into the future and think about, is this something that's going to be desirable, viable, feasible, or not? The example I like the most for design thinking and for understanding it is building ovens for people who use a wheelchair. I like this a lot because one, it allows us to talk about ableism and being inclusive in our product design, which is critical. But it also allows us to test and iterate on a few different ideas. So if we quickly run through this and we try to empathize first, maybe we've never been in this situation, so we don't think about the fact that when you pull down an oven door, you're taking up a lot of space, a lot of ground space, that maybe a wheelchair user would have their wheelchair parked in. And so we have to define the problem now. The problem is about space usage. We ideate a solution to it. Maybe I'm going to think, I'm going to have the oven door pull up and tuck in, kind of like a garage door. I prototype the idea in my head, so I can imagine the oven doors going up like a garage door. And then I'm going to test it. Is it saving up space? Yes, but it's creating a new problem that we didn't think about, which is the oven door handle is going to get really hot if it tucks in. And it's going to be hard for someone to pull it down. You're not going to be able to make it out of glass because glass is not foldable at this stage in our innovation. And so we're going to have to ideate and think about something else. Maybe we're going to do a sliding door off to the side. And so we think about that. Okay, again, maybe not very ideal because we're going to end up covering the cabinet space that's next to it. But it's a bit better. So we're iterating and you go on and on and on. And this is something that you can do. Again, we're prototyping in our head. We're testing in our head. This is a good way to kind of stress test and see if your ideas and if your products are viable and feasible and desirable before you even step a foot outside of your office. Unfortunately, especially for us in the Microsoft ecosystem, because it's a channel-led sales, you often end up having this muscle atrophy because people are not used to doing this iterative testing. They're more so building whatever a customer comes back to them and says, hey, I'm interested in this. And it's going to sell. Maybe you're going to sell to 6, 10, 20, 100 customers, but you're also not thinking about the opportunity cost, meaning maybe this time that you spent building product X could have been better for product Y or product Z. And so it is helpful to do this iterative testing and try to innovate externally first. So let's talk about that. How do you think about your value and what you're delivering to customers and idea on what your customers are looking for? You know, frameworks are just frameworks. I'm going to show a lot of them during today's presentation, but ultimately what matters is finding something that works for you and sticking with it. It's not about using Strategizer's value proposition design canvas, or using design thinking, or anything else. As long as it's something that works, I would not say you have to stick to one or the other. But personally, I do have my preferences, of course, and I like kind of blending in some Strategizer, some IDEO design thinking, some other elements that I've developed myself. And when we look at this value prop canvas, one of the things that should stand out is customers' jobs. If we're thinking about ERP or business applications in general, customer jobs, it's really easy to think about the functional jobs that they have, meaning they need to recognize revenue, or they have to manage across multiple entities, or they have to do their AP automation, or they need to connect between marketing and sales and push their leads through. These are all great, but there's also emotional jobs and social jobs that we have to think about. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Paymerang, who is an AP automation company. Not for their product or anything like that. I don't really care about that element, but I think one of their case studies is really intriguing. They have a case study with American Software. And I personally was a part of the case study, and that's why I'm familiar with it in my past role. The thing that the controller at American Software was so keen to talk about when we recorded the video with him was the fact that he won an award for his innovation in implementing Paymerang. And it was so interesting because that was so clearly an emotional job that the product ticked off for him that overshadowed any functional job that we could have presented. We could have talked about all the innovation in the world. Ultimately, the product making this person the hero and giving him the status and like validation for selecting this product ended up being a really strong selling point that helped him be a champion for the product long term. And so this is one example, one anecdote, but it's a really good way to think about what kind of emotional jobs are you servicing. Maybe your product creates a lot of efficiency in that you can use Business Central on the go. You just click a couple of buttons, maybe you have an overlay on top of it, and it's letting the customer use the product while they're golfing or while they're spending time with their kids. Think about how much stronger of a message we're delivering when we think about this ERP is going to let you spend more time with your kids versus this ERP is going to drive profits for your shareholders. And because of that, they're going to maybe think that you're a good controller, and ultimately you're going to get recognized, right? Like, it's important to think about what direct pains and gains are you solving, how they're connecting to them. The last piece is social jobs. I think we talk a lot about hitting different rooms of the house now in business applications. Think about that. Think about the social jobs that your customer might have and how you can help connect them across different functions within the company, how your offerings can fit within that perspective, and how you design a product that ultimately is going to tick off all these boxes. And so empathy first, I think, is kind of the gist of this discussion. And why it's important is something I alluded to quickly earlier, which is the internal and external triggers for product innovation. If you think about, especially in business applications, why we come up with something new, we sometimes have process innovation. Sometimes we have a shift in compliance standards, like we have new RevRec standards. Maybe that's going to trigger new product development. Maybe sometimes we're going into a new market, and so we have to comply with Swiss tax. Maybe we have feedback from existing end users. We have a demand for integration. Maybe we need to go into NetSuite or something. We have evolving technologies that are driving innovation for everyone and kind of lifting all boats. Maybe we're responding to an RFP. There's usage data, there's competitors, there's a bunch of different things. But what's important about this is that overwhelmingly innovation is coming externally. And that's because internally we're kind of living and breathing the same stuff over and over. It's really hard to be an intrapreneur, where you are inside the company trying to think about what to do differently if you're shut off in a metal box and never thinking about what happens outside of your company. We all have great ideas, but ultimately, the brain trust that is outside of the company is always going to be bigger than the one that's inside the company. And so, trying to think about what's sideways, what's upstream, what's downstream from us is going to help you innovate in your products and build a better product portfolio in general. I want to talk about cars quickly. We're shifting from business applications towards cars, and I think this is a very close example to probably all marketers. If you think about the reasons why people buy a car, I just bought a car. My main reason, and this is going to sound very silly, but I wanted to, when I wear my glasses, I wear glasses when I drive at night, and sometimes I take them off and put them on top of my head like this. And if I drove in my old 18-year-old Corolla over a speed bump, my head always hit the roof, and my glasses, the little like nose holders, would dig into my skull. Very silly reason to buy a car, but it was the main driver for me. I did not have any qualms with my car. It drove great. In fact, that's why I kept it for 18 years. I loved the car. But ultimately, I was fed up with having the glasses hit my head, and I wanted to be able to put them on top of my head. That's definitely not the experience for everyone. Each person has a different reason why they buy a car. Maybe someone cares about safety, maybe someone cares about showing off, maybe someone cares about the environment, they want an e-vehicle, maybe someone cares about the performance and they want to take it on road trips. And so we have all these different reasons why someone might buy a car. And I categorize them. I think these are kind of the main few reasons why people care. And we have to think about, like, why would someone care about acquiring something? And how can we not only create the product that fits their needs, but also understand how to message it to them? And I think that's the blend between product management and product marketing that we really have to clue in on, because you can't message something that you haven't created to begin with. And so good product management has to start with strong product marketing acumen and the ability to ultimately segment. So if we think about the segmentations in our industry and in the business application space, traditionally we think about like SMB, SMC, enterprise. That's kind of how Microsoft might be categorizing them. Maybe we're throwing in public sector and nonprofits as another segment. We're throwing in industry-specific enterprises. What's critical here is recognizing that we don't create segments, we discover segments. And what I mean by that is that you're not ever going to tell someone, oh yeah, by the way, you're an SMB, if they don't recognize themselves as an SMB, if they don't have the goals and challenges of an SMB. Sometimes we have a company that is 2 to 3 people in size, but they're driving 10 plus million in revenue. Are they an SMB? Are they maybe verging on the SMC? Or maybe they are a small mom and pop shop, and that's how we should treat them. Ultimately, what it boils down to is their goals, their challenges, the areas that you're trying to service, and how your product necessitates that segmentation. So for the car example, maybe you are segmenting based on, if we look back at this, maybe you were segmenting on safety, performance, and mileage. But another segmentation that we can discover is maybe people who use the car daily versus people who use it only on occasion. And so we're going to have a car that is like more of a show-off car for the weekend, things like that. It doesn't matter their safety, it doesn't matter its performance, it doesn't matter its mileage. Maybe some people really care about some other factor, like the environment, which we didn't talk about here. We talked more about mileage. And so it allows us to create a segment between EVs, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and gas internal combustion cars. That's a different segmentation that we're discovering that is based on people's own interests and based on their own passion, and allows us to create a different product portfolio that services all of these segments. But just because a segment exists, let's say we have a segment in public sector, doesn't mean that you have to create a product for it. We're going to talk in a second about like how you actually create the products and how you have a product portfolio that's cohesive. But you also have to consider the size of the opportunity, the potential return, and the most important metric that I would say you have to consider when you're deciding on whether to create a product or not is ROIC, your return on invested capital. If you are a constellation company that has a bunch of different products, maybe you're doing everything under the sun. You're doing AP, you're doing AR, you're doing subscriptions, you're doing multi-entity, you're doing leases, you're doing everything, retail management, point of sales, everything like that. If a certain opportunity is taking up way too much capital to build on, let's say it is investment management, maybe you're building a solution to comply with IFRS 17, that's going to take you a lot of time. And ultimately, maybe you're going to discover that people don't really care to have their IFRS 17 compliance inside their ERP. In fact, they probably prefer to have it outside of it and keep things discreet. Well, you've spent all of this time building a product that has some degree of desirability, but you didn't consider the size of return that you're going to get. It goes back to the idea of viability, but it's an important metric to think about when selecting whether a segment makes sense for you or not. Okay. Again, importantly, this has to be an iterative experience. It can't be just a one and done. And so you need to build feedback loops that also empower both your buyers and your sellers. And I think very often we empower buyers. Maybe we have a feedback form, we have a chat bot, we have some way for people to give their feedback, but we're not empowering our sellers because we think, okay, salespeople are being lazy. We're not taking their feedback. What do they know about product? We're really only going to care about what the developers are saying. You have to make your feedback process easy and accessible, and you have to incentivize the engagement from both sides. If you are an SI ISV hybrid, maybe you are an SI that also happens to sell some ISV products. Maybe your sales team is not highly incentivized to give feedback on the ISV side because they're not making a lot of commission on it. They're making more commission on their services sales, and they're making more commission on their core license sales. You have to figure out a way to incentivize your team to give the feedback on the ISV side, because otherwise you're not going to be able to improve your product portfolio. They're going to get into the cycle of just selling what is selling easiest. And ultimately, your product portfolio is going to dwindle down to one or two products and maybe eventually die. So you have to be careful and think big picture. How do we improve all of the products that are around us? Part of that is also creating educational and exploratory content that helps uncover the latent need. Sometimes you might not have a product. Let's say I want to consider, should I start selling, I don't know, Marketo or not? Should I stick with selling Dynamics 365 and HubSpot, or should I start selling Marketo? Maybe I'm going to write a bunch of content about Marketo, and that will help me start understanding, is that something that I should add into my portfolio? In this case, it's really easy to consider it in this sense because I'm talking about license sales for things that already exist. But maybe you're thinking about a product that does not exist yet, and you want to see if there's a level of desirability in the market. Maybe, for example, you are a company that only does AP right now, and you're thinking about, should you do like punch outs and catalogs and procurement management, because that is a little upstream from AP, and you're not really sure if you should expand into that space or not. Well, it's a great opportunity to create some content that speaks to that and allows you to get some feedback on the market, on the level of desirability, and if there is a latent need that you can activate. So let's take a look at actual product portfolio design. On the right-hand side here, we have a pinwheel. I don't know why whenever we talk about product flywheels, we show a pinwheel. I actually did not know that flywheels were like a completely different thing because the visual makes sense. But I found it interesting that as I was searching for graphics, that's kind of not what you're gonna find if you look up a product flywheel. But flywheels in general are a way for you to have a product portfolio that feeds into each one step into the other. Starting out with a core product that delivers value. You want to find a flagship that solves a critical customer problem, allows you to gain market share, that you can use as that anchor to attract users and build trust. So if we think about maybe some close examples to us, I mean, for Microsoft as a whole, as a company, probably the biggest anchor product for them is M365 and the Office suite of solutions. This is something that pretty much every computer has in the world, and so it allows them to land with that. We all have heard land, expand, realize, Microsoft's kind of internal mantra. That is land and expand is a form of flywheel management where you're thinking about how does this first product, Microsoft 365, allow you to leverage feedback on the business solutions on something like Excel, and then use it to build better visualization tools like Power Platform and integrate Power Platform back with some other pieces of your portfolio like Dynamics 365. And so the steps to like kind of call them out separately are starting out with a core product, leveraging the customer feedback to guide future upstream and downstream development, and then driving cross-selling and upselling. I think this is a big problem for a lot of ISVs, especially, is that they end up having a really strong flagship, but not incentivize the stack approach or having multiple different products being co-sold together. And so if you want to think about it in like a very formulaic way, this again is from Strategizer. We have two different phases of product design and innovation. And you can break down your portfolio into products that are in the explore stage and products that are in the capitalize stage. Of course, the explore stage, we have, oh, I be admitting people? Let's go. In the explore stage, we have products that align across return potential and innovation risk. You might have some of your safe plays where you have some return potential, some innovation risk. You have your niche opportunities, lower risk, lower return. You have some promising concepts that have some return potential, but you're not innovating too much on them yet. And then you have your rising stars where there is a lot of risk, there is a lot of potential, and they're maybe ready to go into the capitalized stage. If you look at this, it may seem counterintuitive that as we innovate more, we're introducing more risk. We should be really reducing the risk, but that's the problem that we're kind of wishful thinkers as humans. We think that the more we innovate, the less risky it's going to be. But in reality, as you add more and more to your product, you have a challenge where you might be creating a capitalizable product that you're then disrupting. And that's actually what ends up happening in the capitalized stage. We're adding more and more disruption risk as we drive up return. And so you might think, okay, I'm just gonna stick around here and have my cash cows that I'm not gonna change anything about, not gonna get a lot of return, but I'm not gonna get a lot of disruption on. Well, that's fine if you don't have external forces that are acting on your portfolio, but in reality, if you are in a space that is worth pursuing, you're probably going to have some competitors that will come in that will drive disruption and will force you to go into disruption risk. And so you have to think about both of these elements and really truly consider, where are your products? Are they an explore product or are they a capitalized product? And how can you maximize the return on either side? But just because your product or you are creating value does not necessarily mean you'll be able to capture it. I think one of the biggest examples maybe an old example, maybe not everyone in the audience is going to remember this, but Betamax was kind of first on the scene to introduce at-home video and make it really accessible. But they created a lot of value. They failed miserably at capturing it. VCRs came about. They were cheaper, better, faster, easier, more accessible, and they were able to capture a lot of that value. Similarly, think about like the Microsoft Zune. Microsoft introduced a product, MP3 player, great, works well, super good quality, but they failed to capture the value. And then Apple swooped in, were able to introduce the iPod, captured all the value without having to create a lot of the initial legroom. Apple does this really well today too. They're not really creating a lot of value net new. They're not like undergoing the innovation risk. The way they create value and capture it is through some of the soft elements that they have, and then they're able to capture the value because they have the brand equity. And so for you, you have to think about the smile curve. Traditionally, and this is in most markets, I will caveat that there are markets where actually the midstream ends up capturing the most profit. We can talk about them more during the questions period if someone's interested. But in most markets, you're going to have a lot of profit realization upstream, a lot of profit realization downstream, and this valley of death in the middle, which is kind of funny to call it a smile curve because you really don't want to be in the smile. You want to be in the cheese. But as an ISV or an SI, you always have to think about where you are in the sales cycle, what features are allowing you to capture more of the value that you're creating, and are you at risk of being commoditized? I'll give you an example. We talked about iPods. We'll talk about iPhones. In an iPhone, really, Apple is just coming in at the end and doing marketing. That's how they're driving the value. But a lot of the components are designed and built in Asia, and one of the biggest providers for this is the chip manufacturer Foxconn, and TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Company. They are capturing a good chunk of profit because they are an upstream component developer that makes something really critical. It's not easily commoditized. Maybe there are some companies now in the US that are trying to capture some of that value, but it's not yet a risk. They haven't slid down into the area where they are being commoditized. On the other side, some of the assembly companies, like there was a lot of assembly companies in China, in Guangzhou, that made a lot of profit by being maybe somewhere here. They got commoditized, and now Apple's moving a lot of its assembly work into India, and they are able to commoditize it and move it wherever they want and nearshore it or offshore it or whatever they want to do, because they've eliminated some of that brand equity and they've undergone commoditization risk. On the other side, the downstream finished product brand matters a lot in this case. And so they've managed to build enough brand equity to where they can capture more profit. And so if you are an ISV or an SI, you have to think about, are you closer to being a downstream product or are you closer to being an upstream product? And on either side, you have a different kind of conflict. If you are on a downstream side, you have to think about how you build brand equity so you can capture more of that profit. If you're on the upstream side, you have to think about how do you drive innovation and differentiation, not just from like a finished product brand, but also from a technical innovation, so you cannot get commoditized. And I think this is one of the key things that you have to consider when you're building products. We talked a lot about AP. This is something that a lot of AP companies are having to contend with. We often joke there's like 1,000 new AP companies every time you go to a new conference. Well, how does a company ensure that they are not falling into the valley of death and they are continuing to fight against commoditization? Maybe they're going to add more. Now I'm going to speak about upstream and downstream in the different sense, but maybe they're adding upstream and downstream product features that are allowing them to capture more of that finished product value. Maybe they are going to introduce a new innovation. Maybe their product is now going to serve as a unique vertical, like there are companies that are now targeting like one vertical, maybe manufacturing, or they're targeting like healthcare franchising. That's I know there are companies like Fidesic that are doing really amazing work with that. That's a good way to fight against commoditization that allows you to still stand out and drive value to your clients without having to go all the way into the end product and fight with other companies that might be a part of the value chain. Okay, so we looked at how to build a strong market understanding. We looked at some of the definitions that are going to help you understand what your products should be. We also looked at how to create cohesion between your products and being upstream or downstream. And then we also looked at the value chain overall and what to consider when you are choosing a product and how do you fight against some of the risks. Let's take a look at some resources. One of the first things that I want to do is think about company wins and lessons. Maybe I should have loaded these with some animation to just focus on the wins, but if we only look at the wins on the left side for a bit, Microsoft actually does a really good job of this. We talked about land, expand, and realize. I think the deep integration across the apps helps a lot with buying one product, making it more attractive to buy the next and the next and the next. We do joke a lot about Dynamics 365 being such a like nebulous term at this point, but really Microsoft's done a decent job of ensuring that everyone understands this is one family of products, and at least having the impression that they should function together and they should drive more value together. Apple does this with hardware and software, like I've been harping on about. Shopify, I think, has done a great job of fighting against commoditization. I'm not just saying this because they're also Canadian, but I do think they did a good job of building value upstream and building value downstream, where they're not just a back-end solution that you can easily replace. They've injected themselves in the front end, made it a lot more of a sticky product, made it harder to just rip and replace. On the other hand, Oracle, surprise, surprise, they acquire a lot of products. I think they've done a good job with some of them, like NetSuite, where they were able to capitalize on things. They've incorporated PeopleSoft into it, things like that. But with Eloqua and with Taleo, they really failed, I would say, at combining the value from them into NetSuite. I would bet most people haven't even heard of these products, honestly, because Oracle does not do a good job of getting you to buy more and more of their solutions. They focus more on selling you one product and then the underlying Oracle Data Cloud. Different approach, not necessarily going to enable them to drive more value. WeWork, also, again, they try to target way too many segments. They try to target big enterprise. They try to target small individual entrepreneurs. They try to target small teams, remote teams. They did not consider how each of these segments can clash and can drive down and dilute their brand equity. GE, last example, I think kind of similar to Oracle, but really they went even crazier with how many companies they acquired. They acquired NBC, they acquired GE Healthcare, pharmaceuticals, but they really failed at understanding how they can drive joint value. They actually had a good opportunity to drive joint value, especially with healthcare and pharmaceuticals, but they ended up having to split up their companies because their main source of innovation was internal process innovation. If you are familiar with like 30 Rock, the show, they joke a lot about GE caring about Six Sigma and Lean. And yeah, GE cared a lot about like the process innovation at this time when they were acquiring all of these companies. They thought that that's a way for them to drive profit, but that's a VC way of thinking. That's an extractive approach to product development, not a way of capitalizing and building up value in it. And so they drained a lot of value without thinking about how they can drive a greater pie that allows them to still take up slices of it. And so that's a good lesson for thinking about how do you not acquire and then just extract value and dump your product. Some additional resources. I did not cover a lot in this slide. I think we can spend 40 hours talking about this if we wanted to, but some of my favorite resources here, inspired by Marty Kagan, is a great product management book. There's a whole series that I think is all helpful, but definitely Inspired at the very least is a good book to read. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I think it's probably one of the most recommended books out there. It's a really simple idea, but it's about thinking about why are you building products. If we go back to Apple, I'm not an Apple user. I've been giving them a lot of props, but I think they do a good job of marketing. They're not really an iPhone company. They're not really a computer company. They just try to build beautiful products and market them. And they're really aware of their why. They just happen to do this purpose that they have through building products and computers. Value proposition design, I've used a couple of slides from this. It's a fantastic book by Strategizer. And then the last piece is IDEO. They're the folks behind design thinking. They have a lot of free resources on their website that I would highly, highly recommend. What else you can get is you can download the slide deck. If you use this QR code, it'll send you the slide deck and you can download it. You can use it. You can use anything that's in it and review it. And you can also connect with me. I didn't give an intro at the start. I like to do it at the end. I'm a channel and partner development strategist, and I work through Enki Consulting to help advise Microsoft partners. I do post a lot on my social media, especially on my LinkedIn, which you can use the QR code there to use. Connect with me if you have questions after. If you're watching the recording, feel free to ask any questions that you have. I also post a lot of free resources, both on my site and on my LinkedIn that should hopefully help. And with that, I'll turn it over. If we have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, thank you so much for listening today.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I just saw a message here from Sam. We do have this recorded. It will be up on the Doug YouTube channel in a couple days. And Jacob, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I meant to hit react. My apologies.
Okay. Awesome. And I think, Khaled, are you presenting this topic at Directions in a few weeks?
No, I'm presenting AppSource roadmap, and then I'm also presenting some AI and customer journeys stuff.
Awesome. And the AppSource optimization, that is something you're presenting at the partner marketing event at DynamicsCon, which I think is just such a wonderful extension of what you taught us today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we can expect from that session?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll be, like you said, Kelly, I'll be presenting it at both conferences. This is really all about figuring out how to position and market on AppSource. It is a bit of a different kind of gameplay when you are thinking about an ecosystem that you don't own with AppSource and Azure Marketplace. And so a lot of what we'll talk about is how to present your products and your offerings in a way that resonates with the audience when you only have this limited amount of space to talk about. So we're going to speak about how to rank higher on AppSource. We're going to speak about how to have the right CTAs, whether you push people directly to test drive it or you push people to download the product or anything else, depending on where you are in the cycle of selling your products.
Awesome. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, like I said, this recording will be live on the YouTube channel in a few days. And thank you so much for presenting this. This was a lot of great information for all of us that are ISVs and, you know, putting together that product portfolio. So thank you for sharing all that value with us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Colleen. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, like I said, if you have any questions or are interested in learning more, please feel free to connect with me. I'm happy to answer anything.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.